Welcome to High Infidelity, the best cheating videos on YouTube. If you enjoy this content, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications. Now let's get into the video.
AITA for ruining my friend's wedding by first refusing to give her my own wedding, and then for crying when I was made to leave in a semi-public space. This year, my partner, a 28 male, and I, 25 female, were supposed to marry. And I, as well as my family, would be on the for it. I was wounded months before the wedding. We put the ceremony on hold. The day we had chosen was also important to us. Several suppliers, including the design, food, and location, were unable to repay us. Instead, and I were thinking of throwing a little party on the same day. My buddy EF 27 female was also in a relationship. I had been chatting to her and informed her about our decision to cancel our own wedding. It would be amusing if I held my wedding there instead, she said. I politely declined, stating that that day was still important to me, and that I would be doing something else on that day. EF then convinced her parents, F, that I had provided her the location, food, and decorations. My parents, P, were unaware of this until they paid a visit to my family to deliver the wedding invitations. P was kept up to date on my intentions for the place. However, EF began to weep, pleading with her godparents, P, to agree. P did not confirm anything till they had talked with me. F, and P tried to persuade me, but I refused. EF and EFP began criticizing P of raising their expectations, and then backtracking on their remarks. And I felt forced to say yes under duress. My friend asked me to be a bridesmaid at her wedding. I refused to go. I informed EF that P was available to attend. This caused her to have a nervous breakdown, with all of her friends and relatives phoning me to rage at me. She threatened to call off the wedding if I didn't show up. I requested that I rethink. I promised to come. I did notify F that I would be present. On the wedding day, I phoned a friend to request that the brides and bridal parties' clothing not clash with them. However, EFP grabbed me away and demanded that I change since EF was wearing something similar. I made it obvious that if I left, I would not be returning. The dispute escalated from there, and I left. In the parking lot, I sobbed uncontrollably. Some of our common friends encircled me. I was unaware that EF's supervisor was only around the corner and had overheard me sobbing and was displeased with EF behavior. Other visitors were beginning to congregate close, but I was too distraught to see them. This spread like wildfire during the wedding after we departed, with numerous attendees either criticizing EFP and EF and many more walking out. P chastised me for my actions and for damaging EF marriage, and she received furious texts, social media postings, and angry voicemails from many of her EFP and EF relatives and friends. I've been called a spoiled brat and an attention. Even EFP have told people that they paid for the whole wedding, and that I'm simply throwing a temper tantrum to get attention. I checked with P that they did not pay, but with everyone around me calling me an AITA. I know it's only been a few hours, but I have an update. I did manage to contact the vendor providing all three services, and it turns out that EF misled them into believing that the wedding would no longer take place due to a disagreement between my and A's families, so we had asked her to pre-plan her wedding to replace mine, and that we were going through a lot, so she would be the new point of contact from that point on. We also had a common family member intervene and talk to them, as though they hadn't heard from us yet. It turns out that the EFP was duped into believing that they had paid for the wedding by EF, who received a lump sum payment from her parents. It wasn't until later that she admitted it to them, and instead of admitting their mistake, they opted to double down and enforce it even more. Finally, we wrote a lengthy communication to EF and EFP warning them of their behavior and informing them that we would be in contact with everyone we knew about it. They have yet to answer, but many friends and relatives have contacted out to check on us and comfort us, despite the fact that this occurred just a day ago. They have been kind and have shared additional instances of backstabbing by this family that my family was unaware of. They also heard our side of the story and are standing firm in our defense. Second update. Sorry for the delay. A LOT has been going on. 1. I wanted to clarify the vendor problem since people are really interested in it, and because screenshots of this post have already reached Loved, I'm not worried about people putting two and two together anymore. As a result, the vendors were essentially a single hotel with a large communal hall. We had made a substantial down payment, but a tiny fraction remained to be paid. The deal was reached by word of mouth since this is a privately held company operated by a member of the community. We couldn't cancel, since they only schedule one event each day, not multiples, and canceling would result in a significant income loss for them for the day. From what I gathered too, many of you have been abusive to my parents. In this whole event, they were both ambushed. Yes, they could have been firmer and put less pressure on me, but they did what they believed was best given the circumstances. So many of you are blissfully clueless of social signals and civilizations outside of a very westernized or Eurocentric society. Small migratory communities do exist, and the laws of the group frequently take priority. Thank you, I think, to everyone who has asked me to develop a backbone. My article ended up in a separate subreddit, where many are certain I made it up for some kind of approval. How empty do you think their lives are if their first post on this site is one seeking validation? Is it a forgery, since it is an extremely complicated dumpster fire sort of post? I'm sorry my precise experiences were not particularly comparable to yours, and the events unfolded at what seemed like breakneck speed while my girlfriend was also in and out of the hospital due to spinal damage worries. To preserve character space, I was also compelled to utilize the most ludicrous abbreviations. Now for the important part. Isha F. and her husband are on their way to Paris for their honeymoon, yes, in the middle of the pandemic. The honeymoon is being paid for using money she stole from her parents in the pretense of repaying us. Her parents and I met again yesterday after all of this unfolded in the far extended community, and they were embarrassed to contact us as quickly as possible. Her parents were fooled into paying a big sum of money by their own kid, which she chose to use to take a trip since her boyfriend, and she could not afford to pay for it ourselves. Her family is sorry, but we have made it plain that we would want to see the money repaid, even if in tiny increments, by next year, when my partner and I plan to marry. We will also no longer communicate with the family, which they believe is probably for the best. Isha's in-laws have also heard about it and have cut Isha and her family off until we are fully compensated. We'll get legally married, but we'll wait for a civil marriage before moving in together. Isha is presently in hot water with her family, who have chosen to cut her off and deny any financial access to them. Her family is well off, but she is not the most stable person. However, like in other South Asian societies, children tend to spend the most of their lives, if not all of their lives, with their family. Isha's mother has also apologized for her reaction to the dress change. Isha had told her to urge me to change because she didn't want me to take the spotlight away from her by having my, in her own words, hobbling fiancé, and I become the center of attention, with everyone flocking to empathize with us or congratulate us instead of focused on her. Damn, she could have waited till I had some of the great wedding cuisine. They have so much influence over us because our families have been friends for centuries. While our family was almost homeless, Isha's grandpa helped pay for my grandfather's apartment, and they also took my father in when circumstances were bad to guarantee he received the greatest care and his education and studies were not delayed. As is usual in South Asian cultures, loved ones frequently meet to provide financial assistance at big life milestones, and they did the same. They stepped in and helped pay for my mother's medical expenditures when I was born, owing to the sheer tragedy of my delivery and the medical catastrophe that afterwards. There were other additional occasions when her family stepped in to assist us, including last year when I lost a grandfather, and they helped us through the emotional toll it had on us. We can't simply brush these incidents aside and start cutting people off, at least not yet. While I will be eternally thankful to Grandpa and Grandma on Isha's behalf, I cannot do the same for her. I felt like a jerk. I actually did when I began writing this. I was emotionally weary, and everyone around me chastised me for a very public outburst. South Asians and emotions don't go together until in our favorite over-the-top movies. Isha was also on the verge of being fired, which contributed to the hatred I was receiving from others around me. Isha reportedly sobbed throughout the wedding when she learned about it, and a bride's tears always tug at the heartstrings. I was informed that as her closest friend, I could have done the polite thing and volunteered to be a bridesmaid. I was advised I shouldn't have had such a public breakdown. My family could have been generous in giving them the wedding and then sorted it out later in private, rather than causing an embarrassing fuss, according to one source. When I first wrote the 9,000-odd character post, which I had to substantially alter to fit 3K characters, I felt like a complete